place, and I go past it just about every day because I live on top of the hill from there. It is what we call a Superfund location. And most people, a Superfund location is where you have to have bioremediation to get the different elements out.
Another nearby example of that is the Fernald Preserve,
Oh,
the old
yes.
Fernald Feed Materials Production Center.
Yes.
Old nuclear productions.
Which is more up towards Oxford area, right?
Ross.
Ross.
Is the closest area. It's Crosby Township, so it's not, it's northwest. Not far from the Indiana state line.
Right, and that was, yes, very good example, but anyway, they have. Safe now.
That's what they say about Fernald too.
But it had lead, mercury, copper, antimony, arsenic, and the soil is dissolved. And I read an article on it. It seems like they built this underground vault, and placed most of those in the vault underground, and then they renovated the whole site. And now there's a developer that just got permission to build apartments in a big building. So I'm kind of watching to see how that develops. It'll be quite interesting. In addition, which would be pea, soybeans, alfalfa, clover. They are in the legume family of plants, and they take that into Premier and turn it into nitrates, which plants can use. So it's a way of enriching the soil. If you rotate crops, if you have corn planted in one area one year, and it takes a lot of nitrogen out of the soil, you might want to plant a legume the next year. Alfalfa, which could be used for hay, is something that you might want to put there to save on fertilizer. So these are different processes to do that. And then chapter 56, conservation biology and global change. Scientists have named and described 1.8 million species, and biologists are estimating there are really 10 to 100 million species that exist on Earth that we continue to try to identify. And where is the most diverse? The tropical rainforests contain some of the greatest concentration of species and are being destroyed at an alarming rate. So that's a big concern. Humans are rapidly pushing many species towards extinction. Conservation biology, which seeks to preserve life, integrates several fields: ecology, physiology, which is how things function, molecular biology, the DNA and proteins, genetics, molecular and heredity, and evolutionary biology. Kind of integrate all of those. 56.1, human activities threaten Earth's biodiversity. And 3 levels of biodiversity. 3 main components are genetic diversity, species diversity, and ecosystem diversity. And there are examples of each of those 3 there. An endangered species is in danger of becoming extinct throughout all or a significant portion of its range, which is where it lives, habitat. A threatened species is likely to become endangered in the foreseeable future. Ecosystem diversity, human activities reducing ecosystem diversity, the variety of ecosystems in the biosphere. More than 50% of wetlands, and that's always a big concern for wetland areas. areas in the contiguous United States have been drained and converted to other ecosystems or subdivisions. Who wants to build on a floodplain? That can pose a problem, yes.
Well, I wanted to also give an example of such, where the ecosystems have been converted. I think I might have told you about the Great Black Swamp that one time that used to be in northwestern Ohio, stretching into northeastern Indiana. It was
Yes.
artificially drained during the 1800s.
Wow, and I used to
And
live
it's now just
in,
grassland.
I used to live in Bowling Green, and I didn't really.
Yeah, that's how I told you about it.
Yeah, I knew it was a swamp, but I guess I didn't know all the particulars. Yeah, good point. Please understand, because of ecology, the local extinction of one species can affect other species, because if you have an extinction of a species that other species eat, then what are they gonna eat? They're not used to eating other things. Sometimes they go hungry and sometimes they starve. The benefits of species and genetic diversity related to agricultural crops can have important genetic qualities. This is artificial selection. Plant breeders are breeding virus-resistant commercial rice by crossing with the wild population. And in the United States, 25% of prescriptions, drug prescriptions, contain substances originally derived from plants. For example, the rosy periwinkle contains alkaloids that inhibit cancer growth, or can inhibit cancer growth. So what are introduced species? They're those that humans move from native locations to new geographic regions. And without their native predators, parasites, pathogens, individual species may spread rapidly because they don't have predators, native predators. Introduced species can gain a foothold in a new habitat, usually disrupt their adopted community. I can think of two, the starling birds, that are black. They kind of have an iridescence to their wings, and they're just kind of pests almost. Starlings were introduced here from Europe, and they just sort of overtook a lot of other species of birds. Another example would be the multiflower rose bushes. If you go in these woods here, or in most any untended areas where there's a woods, you usually have multiflower rose, and it looks like a rose because the flower looks like a rose, but it also has thorns on it. And this was actually generated in the 50s, I believe. They actually purposely planted these in Ohio because the farmers thought that they would make good boundaries in their acreage without having to build expensive fences. Well, the thing is that they're almost impossible to kill, and they spread. And that's what we didn't know when we brought them. And you have to, if you're in an area where they are, you have to cut them back like every year, or they'll just overtake. And they are thorny, and they're just not, even though they're pretty to look at, they have a lot of drawbacks. So those are just a couple. This genetic diversity also includes humans as well. It can be applied to humans, and so many times we think we're talking about animals. Well, don't forget that we're also animals. We have animal characteristics. We are. So genetic diversity contributes to a wide gene pool, which can benefit people. Ecosystem services encompass all the processes through which natural ecosystems and their species help sustain human life. Some examples of ecosystem services: purification of air and water, detoxification, decomposition of waste, cycling of nutrients, moderation of weather extremes. What are some threats to biodiversity? Habitat destruction, introduced species, overharvesting, and global change. which can also include climate change. Sometimes humans introduce species by accident. For example, something can, like the brown tree snake, arrived in Guam as a cargo ship stowaway. They didn't do it on purpose and led to the extinction of some local species of snakes because it overtook the other snakes and it became in abundance. We have to be careful. There are, like, the one time I've gone to Hawaii, you get off the plane in Hawaii and there are signs everywhere. You cannot bring anything alive with you into the island because
They have strict laws on introduced species. in
Yes.
Hawaii. They're one of they're the state with the strictest laws on that in the country.
exactly, because they're fearful of that same thing happening, the overtaking of the thing.
Yeah, the only thing you can bring in are cats and dogs.
Yeah, but even they have to be quarantined for
And
2
you have
months.
to have a vet clearance as well, so.
I think it's a month or two, I think they have to be quarantined, to come on the island also, but you see why, because it's like paradise, and if you bring in something that's gonna overtake the beautiful flora, of the islands, that would not be a good thing. Global change includes alterations in climate, atmospheric chemistry, what's in the air, and broad ecological systems. Acid precipitation contains sulfuric acid and nitric acid from the burning of wood and fossil fuels and the burning of coal as well. We have sulfuric acid that combines in the air. You have sulfur dioxide, and then you have it combining with oxygen, and you actually get sulfuric acid developing and nitric acid developing. And so our rain has actually changed. Here's the pH of rainwater over the years. This starts in around 1965 to 2010. It's gone from about typical rain pH of around 4.13 or so, up to around 4.65 or something like that. That can make a huge difference on plants. In fact, there's a lot of deforestation that's going on even in the Gatlinburg Mountains, that they believe is from acid rain as well. And it also has a huge effect on animals such as amphibians that live in streams. And that pH, that little bit of pH difference is really affecting
What about that huge wildfire that they had
in Gatlinburg.
years back too, because that also
Yes.
impacts ecosystems.
That was only just a few years ago. I think, they think it was not a natural cause, but
I think somebody probably like threw a cigarette or something.
yeah, they thought they had a couple teenagers that they were accusing of playing with matches, fires, getting out of control, but I'm not sure, what the end result was for that. So weighing conflicting demands. Conserving species often requires resolving conflicts between habitat needs of endangered species and human demands. You know, for example, in the U.S. Pacific Northwest, habitat preservation for many species is at odds with timber and mining industries. The mining brings up a whole bunch of possibly degrading and toxic chemicals and tearing down the timber. So you're always seeing that tug of war between environmentalists and the timber people. Okay, so landscape and regional conservation helps sustain biodiversity. And you can read through this, because I think this information is pretty important for these two chapters in addition to your outlines. Corridors that connect habitat fragments. There sometimes is an area where a species gets sort of isolated in a certain part, But if you can provide like a bridge or something that they can, a movement corridor that they can move across, then that enhances their chances of extending their range. So being cognizant of that. Preserving biodiversity hotspots, and there are hotspots in the world where they are trying to preserve a greater biodiversity. Nature reserves. Costa Rica, they've got an example of Costa Rica for that. Also, zoned reserves model recognizes that conservation often involves working in landscapes that are largely human dominated. 56.4, Earth is changing rapidly as a result of human actions. The locations of preserves today may be unsuitable for their species in the future. Human-caused changes in the environment include nutrient enrichment. What was that called? If you have algal blooms, what's that called?
Eutrophication.
Eutrophication, very good. Accumulation of toxins from human activities. Climate change. Human-caused climate change. And ozone depletion. Ozone is O3. You know, oxygen in the air is O2. O3 is where it has like 3 oxygens together, and it provides a protective layer at the top of the atmosphere, which helps to block out some of the harmful ultraviolet rays. The problem is that we have bigger holes in our ozone than we used to have, and that is leading to skin cancers as well. So you can read also toxins in the environment, and the concept of biological magnification concentrates toxins at higher trophic levels where biomass is lower. Okay, perfect example, which leads me to Rachel Carson, who is known to be probably one of the first early ecologists, and she wrote, they called it a novel, but it really was a prediction of the future, and it was called Silent Spring, where the birds were gone and no longer singing because of the environmental changes that she foresaw. PCPs and many pesticides such as DDT are subject to biological magnification ecosystems. DDT, I remember when it was still used. I was on the farm as a kid back in several decades ago. All right, so when DDT was still being used, and in areas of the world where malaria was a possibility, they used DDT. They saved a lot of lives by using DDT as an insecticide. It killed the mosquitoes, and the mosquitoes were the vectors to malaria in areas that were prone to malaria. So it saved a lot of lives. But what they found out is that it increased biological magnification. It increased in the bodies of the organisms as they were eaten by higher organisms. So actually, all right, I'll tell this story. When I was a biology major, education major at Bowling Green, my undergrad, and my advisor, she was pretty out there. She was pretty, and for me, because I was just this naive young person, and I walked into her office, and she had this big picture of a woman's breasts with a quote on it saying, "Unfit for human consumption." She really was a marine biologist by trade, but she was really into the ecology movement. And that's really true, because what they found is that DDT magnifies, and so do other pesticides and things in our environment. So if there's something that eats an insect that has been sprayed with DDT, they take it into their fat storage areas in their body. And then if that particular organism gets eaten by something else, it gets transferred into the fat of the next one. And it actually gets magnified. It gets enlarged as it goes up the food chain. And so that was the reason behind that particular poster. So this is where it's talking about this 1960s Rachel Carson. And I just told you the story. She was well aware of the larger implications of her work. She eventually died from breast cancer in 1964. I thought, when I looked this up, I thought this was really very, I mean, it was just really a statement, even though I would probably use the male lingo. But she said, man's attitude toward nature is today critically important, simply because we have now acquired a fateful power to alter and destroy nature. But man is a part of nature, and his war against nature is inevitably a war against himself. We are challenged as mankind has never been challenged before, to prove our maturity and our mastery, not of nature, but of ourselves. Whew. From 1960s. I mean, I remember the first ecology movement. So, yeah, I'm dating myself, but that's okay. All right, this is Rachel Carson, the second spring. Rising atmospheric CO2 levels, the greenhouse effect. Every time you have combustion of a fuel, a fossil fuel, gasoline, you have coal, you have anything being combusted, you end up producing, which is like us. Every time we respire, cellular respiration, we respire glucose. We breathe out CO2. But machines breaking apart gasoline and other fossil fuels give out huge amounts of CO2 into the air. And this is a problem. It gets trapped under the ozone so that it's like a greenhouse effect. It warms because it doesn't get out into the upper atmosphere, and the sun still comes through. And so the greenhouse effect ends up heating up. I'm not saying it never gets cold. Of course it gets cold too. But it has drastic effects. Climatologists can make inferences about past environments and their climates by pollen and fossil plant records reveal past vegetation. CO2 levels are inferred from bubbles trapped in glacial ice, and chemical isotope analysis is used to infer past temperatures. So the greenhouse effect. Okay, I'll get your questions in a second. If you look at this chart from 1960 again up to 2010, this is the CO2 concentration. And this is the average global temperature. Look at the CO2 in red. The temperature's in red. I'm sorry. Temperature's in red. The blue is the CO2. Look at this. From 1960 to 2010, it's almost a straight line effect. Now, if we continue that line and that approach without doing anything about it, we have problems. Yes, go ahead.
So, another thing I noticed too about that is these coal burning power plants.
Oh, yeah.
Because I like I might have told you last week, over spring break we went to the Bonewood one day.
Right.
On the way down, you see tons of power plants in the distance and all that greenhouse gases going on.
Yep.
Because in fact, I could see one as far south as Carroll County shooting greenhouse gases way up into the atmosphere, only accelerating that.
That is true. But on the other hand, we need energy, right? We like our electricity.
There are better sources though.
But are we willing to put the money into investing in them?
Our politicians are saying no.
Actually, They're saying the northern coniferous forests, which are called the taiga and the tundra, remember the biomes, show the strongest effects of global warming. A warming trend would also affect the geographic distribution of precipitation. Okay, I'm not going to go through all of this, but it's got some good stuff. We talked about the ozone a little bit and all about this. So this was what I threw in right here. Science is real. Facts are facts and lead to theories that affects everything we do, the Pebble effect. To ignore what we already know is to commit global suicide of all organisms in the future. If not all, but some. Just a thought. You don't have to believe it, but we got some serious issues that we really need to look at. And particularly in relationship to the exam. Right? Okay, so, can I have about 3 people to pass out these quizzes?
I can help you.
In fact, yours is right there on top.
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you. Somebody else? How do I do that?
Barb. Yep. How are you? Got that?
Amy?
Angela Carter. Olivia Martin.
Professor Barker, is this
Yes. In the back.
Abigail Graham?
Karen Corey.
Sorry. Brandon?
Sorry.
Taylor Ackers?
That are novelists, they're head-footed, Cephala means head. They're the most intelligent of the group, too.
Still they have like internal shells.
An internal shell. You know the squid kind of does. I would, you've got this quiz, you've got the first quiz. And I would definitely reread through those because, you know, that some of them could come back. It's possible. It's certainly, you need to study a lot more than just this, but start with this and the other one. Any other questions? They were 1 point apiece, so it's out of 20. I think we had, let's see, 90% of 20 would be 18. We had at least 3 or 4, if not more, A's on that, yes. Oh, nematocyst is really the more proper answer. If you put nidariasis or some other form, I might have accepted that. But a lot of people put down choanocytes. Those are actually not stinging cells. Those are cells that are inside of the sponge and help to carry the food around. So they, that one. Okay, any questions about that?
I just read them, so I just read that. I'm not focused. The main thing I studied the most are my actual notes, and then I know
Okay, I thank you. I have several, in fact, I should give, no, I don't want to get these back to you yet because I still haven't made it like test yet. But thank you. I've got several people who did questions. Here's one that says, in the class Mammalia, they have a 4-chambered heart with a blank aortic arch. mammals?
Left.
Left. It goes to the left. Birds go
Right.
to the right. Okay. And do birds have a 4-chamber heart?
Yes.
Yes. A virus is a type of cell. False. It is not cellular. It is not really considered a true organism. What were the 3 descriptors that I used for a virus, their lifestyle? Obligate. Do they go inside a cell or outside the cell? Intracellular, and then what is the lifestyle? Parasite. Thank you, we got it. Obligate, intracellular, parasite. They actually use the cell machinery of the host. They cannot do any of that by themselves. They have no cell structure. Viruses are made of, let's just go ahead and finish this, 2 main parts, made of 2 organic compounds. Viruses. They're made of 2 main organic molecules. What are they?
DNA.
I'm sorry, what?
One's DNA, isn't it?
One's DNA or RNA in the core.
Protein.
Usually it's one or the other. And then what's their coat made of? Protein. Okay, so it's protein coat with a core of either DNA or RNA. If it's an RNA virus, which enzyme do they have? Opposite of the central dogma of communication, which is from DNA to RNA to protein. Is this all sounding familiar? Okay, this person was kind enough to actually do a multiple choice. Which class has the lateral line, which helps it to sense vibrations and movements? Here are 4 choices. Osteichthyes, Chondrichthyes, Cyclostomata, Amphibia. Osteichthyes is the best answer. There might be some Chondrichthyes, I'm not sure. But I think we presented it as though it was sort of an Osteichthyes trait. There might be some exceptions. True or false? Birds have internal fertilization. True. They rub their cloacas together. The cloaca is the common opening of 3 systems. What is the study of fish called?
Theology.
Ichthyology, yes. What phylum are the earthworms in? Annelida, yes, Annelida, or Annelida. You know what it means? It means little rings for segmented worms. What does a, okay, let's reword this. Flukes, which are a type of flatworm, have a very complicated life cycle. They spend part of their time in another animal before they get to their host. Snail, right. They spend part of their life cycle in a snail before they go to their regular host. So,
Is their host typically mammals?
yes, I think typically. Okay, what is transcription?
It's the process of making like an mRNA template of DNA to be used for translation.
Yeah, very good. It is DNA to messenger RNA. That's transcription that happens in the nucleus. It's from DNA to messenger RNA. Yes. what kind of birth does, oh, this is tough. What kind of birth, a reproduction, well, birth, does an ovoviviparous individual have? Describe how the young come into the world. Go ahead.
The egg hatches within the mother.
And so it looks like live birth, I mean, because the egg hatches inside, ovoviviparous. Now, what's the word for placental? Like we have placentas, and so the baby is a live birth because it's nourished with placental membranes. So of all of those words, what is the word to represent a placental? Viviparous, live birth. Viviparous. Paris is a parenting. Okay, so live birth, viviparous. And what is it called if you're a duck-billed platypus? The monotreme, the group, the order monotreme. What kind of those words is that? Oviparous. Ova means egg. Oviparous, laying eggs. Yes. Name the 4 characteristics that all chordate animals have in common at some point in their life. Go ahead. Notochord, dorsal notochord. What's another thing? Anybody else? Yes. Post-anal tail. Yes. 2 more. Yeah, they really are sort of like gills. They have the pharyngeal slits. And a dorsal nerve cord. Yes, dorsal nerve cord. The term for the subphylum of animals that have a mouth with jaws, say they're clad of gnathostomes, Gnathostomatata, gnathostomatas. Gnath means jaw. Viruses that infect bacteria are called what?
Bacteriophage.
Yes, or phage, however you want to pronounce it. Bacteriophages. Sorry. I think I'm going to get the hiccups. This is going to be
Does that have like more than one company, or is it supposed to be like pronounced a certain way?
It's not a big deal to me because even biologists that come from different areas of the country will say them differently. I usually say phage, but phage is also okay.
Because I think that I've heard it pronounced like both ways.
Yes.
It just depends on the dialect.
Yeah, there are differences.
Because Dr. Preston gave an example last semester of that where, you know, meiosis is sometimes in some areas pronounced meiosis.
Yes, that's right. Right. What kind of lifestyle organisms eat already dead organisms?
Tridivores.
I'm sorry, what?
The tridivores.
Okay, you're talking about the tridivores, okay. That can also be just organic matter that they help to recycle. But if you're actually looking for dead things, scavengers, okay, yes. Which is the group of vertebrates that have 2 lives on both land and water? Amphibians, right. They're tied to water. They still have external fertilization. They have plexus in the water. But they can be on land also. In their water. What are the 3 main parts of a mollusk? Oh, okay, the head, the foot, and the place where all the organs are.
The visceral mass.
visceral mass or hump. I've heard it in terms of a hump too. Because when you eat a clam, and when you eat all the innards, the whole inside, you're eating the visceral hump. The foot would be a little chewy at the bottom, and the mantle is that layer that's kind of over the outside. And it secretes the shell of, the mantle has the ability to secrete the shell in shell-producing mollusks. And we didn't say this before, but if a parasite or a piece of sand gets in between the mantle and the shell, what can be formed because of the inside of the shell? A pearl. Yes.
And then if you eat those, you know, those fried clam bits too, that you get, what are those? Or what is that?
You know, I've often wondered, but a lot of them are chewy like they're the foot. I don't know.
Guys, like,
They-
by part plants,
What did you say?
I was just like joking, I was saying like, why fried clams, like dissect it to see like what they put inside of it.
Well, we're actually going to be dissecting a clam, aren't we?
I guess it depends on like which lab.
I know,
Dr. Green is.
I think we're scheduled for a clam, aren't we? Are we scheduled for a clam?
And then, if you really want the best clam strips, come to Pelican's Reef in Anderson. Really good seafood restaurant. They got really good clam strips there.
Good recommendation. I like seafood, most of it, as long as it's not too fishy. I know it's good. Name the most basic animal in the phylum it's in.
Peripera.
Peripera, right. Is it deuterostomes or protostomes that have their first opening being in their mouth?
Yeah.
How many of you say protostomes? How many of you say deuterostomes? Okay, protostomes win. What are we, protostome or deuterostome? We're a deuterostome. Name another major phylum of invertebrates that is also a deuterostome. What?
We both said it. Go ahead.
Kind of dramatic, you said it at the same time. Okay, the starfish group, the water vascular system. The unsegmented roundworms are called what? Nematoda, right. The common chamber that has a single opening to the outside from the digestive, reproductive, and urinary or excretory tract, we just mentioned a few minutes ago, is the what? Cloaca. I said birds rub their cloacas together. Reptiles tend to too, but then birds are really glorified reptiles, right? Yes. It's CLOACA, cloaca, with a C. We know that the study of animals is botany, right?
No, that's plants.
Oh!
Zoology. is
April
what you're
Fools,
looking
yes.
for.
Oh my gosh, I forgot to.
I was listening to a radio station on the way in, and their contest was that they were interspersing their regular ads with ones that weren't real for April Fool's jokes, and you're supposed to call in. And so I was listening to this one about if you can't sleep, you got sleeping problems, there's a sleep hammer that you can purchase, and if you knock yourself in the head with a sleep hammer, then you'll go to sleep.
You may have such a good sleep you might not wake up.
Which station was it?
How dangerous.
It was 98 point.
198.
I don't always listen to that. I jump around.
One of my presets.
What's the first group to have bilateral symmetry?
Say it again.
First group down.
Bilateral symmetry means that you would cut it down through the middle and have approximately equal right sides and left sides. Something before that, in terms of advanced, climbing the. Yes? Actually, the hydra has radial symmetry because it's got its mouth-like area and the tentacles radiating outward. So to split that, you would have to go up and down. As long as you go through the middle of it, you could go up and down either direction. And starfish would also be, it's kind of a throwback to radial symmetry. I think the best answer is probably Platyhelminthes, the flatworms. What was that free-living flatworm? Planaria.
We used to follow that. Dr. Markers, we used to follow that. That last word, though.
Planaria?
Yeah.
Planaria. It's the one that's kind of got the neat-looking head, it's kind of arrow shape, and it's got two eye spots, it's flat, and you can fight in the streams. And they're great for regeneration studies because if they're cut in the right place, they'll grow back. Some of the missing parts. What is probably the most important development that led to vertebrates being able to be completely terrestrial? Amniotic egg, right, very good. If I said a dry scaly skin and about a 3.5 chambered heart, you would say which group? Reptiles, reptilia, they have lungs. Okay, development. From the zygote dividing by mitosis, you end up with a solid ball of cells at first, which is called a morula. And then as it continues to divide, it then throws the cells to the outside and creates a hollow ball of cells called a blastula. And then later on, particularly if it's a higher up animal, it ends up dividing into 3 cell layers. There's an invagination, and that's called the gastrula. Yes. Very good. Which class of vertebrates has a diaphragm? Who?
Mammals.
Mammals. That separates the thoracic chest from the abdominal cavity and helps to inhale and exhale more strongly to get more air in. Which organ, talking human just kind of off the cuff here, which organ of the human requires the highest percentage of oxygen to run?
Brain.
Brain. That's why if somebody's suffocating, brain damage is
Asphyxiation.
one of the first things to happen. Are we ectothermic or endothermic? We are endothermic. We're warm-blooded or cold-blooded. If a fish feels vibrations of somebody splashing, which structure is it that's picking that up? Lateral line. There's another way of approaching the same thing we just talked about earlier. Senses that. Does a grasshopper, okay, let me put it to you this way. Insects, which are a division of the arthropods, and there are more insects than all other animals, they're changing from the young to the adult is called metamorphosis. And you can use that term for other animals too, but they have either complete or incomplete metamorphosis. which one is it that has the egg, larva, pupa, adult?
Homo metabolus metamorphosis. That's the term for complete.
Oh, yeah, okay, let's keep it simple.
Complete
This is
metamorphosis.
one case we don't need to be that complex. Complete, yes.
True.
Complete metamorphosis is egg, larva, pupa, adult. And a fly would be an example of that. Incomplete metamorphosis would be eggs hatching into little nymphs, look like little miniature adults, but they don't have all the wings and stuff. And that would be, that classic example is a grasshopper. And so it's eggs, nymphhoods, and adult. It's egg, larva, pupa, adult. And for butterflies, it would be egg, caterpillar, pupa, and an adult, yes. Incomplete, yeah. Incomplete, you have the egg hatching into a little nymph, N-Y-M-P-H. And the nymph kind of looks like a grasshopper, but it doesn't have all the wings that an adult has. And it continues to molt. That's the shedding of the skin, the exoskeleton made of chitin. And it continues to molt until, it's about 7 molts or so until it becomes an actual adult grasshopper with 2 sets of wings and spits tobacco. Yes.
Is it like that, once again, typically have like a more vibrant coloration, and then as they get older, it's more extinct?
I think that's a possibility, particularly in some that have the incomplete metamorphosis. A lot of them are green. I think the nymphs will have either green or brown. Okay, I know it's time, and you need to let me go. Don't forget Wednesday's your big test. Just keep studying.